Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while, but I've got another Elden Ring build video today. Today I'm going to be highlighting my Unseen Samurai build. This is a build you'll enjoy if you like the dual-wield katana moveset. You'll also enjoy it if you like using magic primarily as a support rather than a main damage dealer. You can start playing this build early in the game, and what I really like about it is that it scales really well throughout the game. As you progress and make it to new areas, you'll find additional items that are going to help you with your build, and it's going to scale really linearly, so you'll get more and more powerful as you play through the game. And if you really enjoy it, you can play it all the way through the end game. So for starting equipment, the main thing you're going to need is an uchi katana. For this, I recommend you start as a samurai, but if you don't, you can just grab the uchi katana in the northern part of Limgrave right when you start out. It's pretty easy to just go into the dungeon there and grab it. Another pretty good starting class for this, stat-wise, is the prisoner, but really you could do it as just about any class. Your class really isn't too big of a deal, but if you're not starting as samurai, it means you're going to have to pick up a couple extra items. Once you have your starting weapon, you'll play through the starting area just as a single-wielding samurai kind of play style. And then once you're between level 30 and 35, you're going to want to head over to Caelid because we're going to grab our other katana, which is going to be the Moonveil. Now, getting the Moonveil could be difficult for you if you're fairly new to the game, and if you're struggling with it, make sure that you've upgraded your uchi katana with smithing stones as high as you can. And if you're still struggling with it, you can always come back a little bit later and just keep playing through the game with one katana in the meantime. Once we hit around level 35 and we have the stat spread we need to dual wield our uchi katana and Moonveil, you're going to want to make sure that you grab the magic wet blade so that you can set the magic affinity on your uchi katana. I played with a couple different Ashes of War. Early in the game, you can just use the default art, which is Unsheath, and it's a decent one. Because we're going for a somewhat stealthy and quick moving playstyle with this, I actually like to grab Quick Step and use that as my Ash of War until I get to Northern Liurnia, where I can grab the Chilling Mist Ash of War. And once you have that, I've been using Chilling Mist with the magic affinity on the uchi katana, which is really good because it gives me both standard and magic damage, and it allows me to enchant my uchi katana with frost so that I can set frost buildup in addition to the bleed from the katanas. And then once you have your two primary weapons, you can run over to Caelid and to Celia. And in Celia, you're going to pick up a sorcery as well as your staff, which will be the Staff of Loss. The school of magic that we'll use for this build is the Night School. And we'll be using a couple different spells. Because we're not putting a whole lot of points into mind, our main damage is coming from our katanas, and the sorceries we're using are more of support than anything. You will find yourself in situations where you need a ranged attack, and so for that, we have a couple different options we can choose. The earliest one you can use is Ambush Shard, and this one's okay. It's more situational. It's good against enemies that are holding up a shield because you can hit from behind them. It's also pretty good if you ever need to attack someone through a wall because it makes the projectile appear behind them. And then as you get higher in your intelligence stat and you can afford to use Night Shard, I recommend you use that one. And then eventually Night Comet hits pretty darn hard, but it does use a lot of mine, so you're not going to want to be using it all the time. One advantage of the night sorceries is that when you cast them, they're effectively invisible to the enemy, so they don't try to dodge them. This can be really useful when you're fighting enemies that like to dodge a lot of your attacks. Situationally, Night Maiden's Mist is also going to come in handy. Night Maiden's Mist works well for large groups of enemies and also really large bosses. You just have to be careful not to step into it because it will sap your life as well. Sometimes I like to use it as an opener for certain bosses just to suck a little bit of their health at the start and give me a little bit of a head start. Night Shard and Night Maiden's Mist are purchased from Gowry after you progress in the Millicent questline. So like I said earlier, once you progress in your story to that point, you'll pick up these sorceries. The last night sorcery we're going to actually use is Unseen Form. This is one that you pick up once you reach the plateau at one of the tower puzzles. This tower puzzle can be a little bit difficult to figure out on your own, so give it a try, and then if you get stuck, you can check online for the answer on how to solve it. As far as our armor, it's not too important other than for RP purposes. So if you started as a samurai, you'll just use the reed set, and then if you didn't and you want to pick it up, you can purchase it from one of the merchants. Eventually, once you reach the mountaintop of the giants, you can pick up the white reed set. This isn't really too much of an upgrade, but it does fit the aesthetic a little bit better, I think. Especially with the Okina mask, which does give you a small benefit because it raises your dexterity a little. As far as talismans go, you have a lot of different options, and I recommend you choose based on your playstyle. If you want to play as more of a stealthy character, I recommend you use the Crepice's Vial. This is going to help you sneak around a lot better, especially when you're using it in combination with Unseen Form. You can run through an enemy camp without most of them noticing you. I also recommend you use the Winged Sword Insignia and then later replace it with the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia or Millicent's Prosthesis. We're going to be trying to chain a lot of attacks, so this will help us build up our attack power quickly. If you really want to stack up your attack power, you can equip several of these. Another staple that we're going to be using is the Magic Scorpion Charm. This is going to buff all of our magic damage we deal as sorcery, also as the magic damage we deal from our Moon Veil and our Magic Affinity Uchigatana. If you find yourself using your weapon skills a lot that's draining your FP, then the Ancestral Spirit's Horn is really good to manage that as well. If you need substitutes for these early in the game, you can use any of the talismans that boost your dexterity, vigor, or intelligence, because these are going to be your main stats that you want to invest in. So once we reach the dexterity we need to wield both the Uchigatana and the Moon Veil, we're going to be primarily putting points into intelligence to raise our damage and vigor to raise our survivability. So I recommend you focus on both of those stats until you get them up pretty high where you're starting to see diminishing returns. But this won't be until you reach sort of like the late mid-game to late game. And once you reach that, you may want to start putting a few extra points in dexterity. This is going to improve the damage of your Moon Veil and your Uchigatana to a lesser degree. As far as your crystal tiers, you got a few options here as well. You could use the dexterity or intelligence knot crystal tier, which is going to improve your damage. A better one is the magic shrouding crack tier. This is going to boost all of our magic damage, and so this one's going to be pretty important for you. And then eventually, if you want, you can grab the thorny crack tier once you get up to the consecrated snowfield. You may want to drop a couple points in mind and endurance just to make sure you're not running out of FP prematurely, and also just enough endurance to make sure that you're not heavy rolling. Because our weapons are fairly light, they don't consume a ton of stamina, so it's really easy for us to chain a lot of attacks in a row, and running out of stamina usually isn't much of an issue. Other support sorceries worth mentioning are Terra Magica. If you're ever in a situation where you can put this down and cast from afar, Terra Magica can boost your magic quite a bit. Terra Magica also scales the magic damage you deal with your weapons, including the weapon skill on your Moon Veil. Generally, when fighting with swords, you have to dodge, so it can be hard to pull off fighting within this zone. Also, Starlight is handy to have if you have any sorceries. It keeps you from having to wield a torch in your offhand. Alright, so how this build plays. When you're out in the world, you're going to use tools like the Crepice's Vial, Unseen Form, and a lot of crouching to sneak around and get the jump on your enemies. Typically what I like to do is cast my Unseen Form, sprint into an enemy, take them out, and then crouch and sneak away before the others notice me, and you just kind of rinse and repeat this to take out the whole camp. For larger enemies and bosses, you're going to rely on your Chilling Mist, Ash of War to set Frostbite, and then try and get as many attacks off with your katanas to boost your attack power with your Winged Sword Insignia or Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, whichever you have equipped, and try to set bleed on them. Keep in mind that once they have Frostbite, they're going to take more damage from all sources because it reduces their mitigation. If you need to keep a little bit more range between you and the enemy, this is where the skill from Moon Veil comes in handy. because it has a pretty long reach, and it also deals pretty decent poise damage. So if you cast a couple of them, you can poise break a lot of enemies. Also, when you use the Moonveil weapon skill on an enemy that's frostbitten, plus if you're standing in Terra Magica, it deals ridiculous damage. And then of course, if you need even more range, you can use some of your sorceries. I've had a ton of fun playing this build, and it's actually really, really good. I will say that one boss I struggled with was Radahn, because you don't have a lot of damage mitigation with this build. Because we are wearing light armor and we don't have a ton of points in vigor, you really need to be pretty good at dodging his attacks. But this really is a great build for you to start out with early in the game, and it progresses really linearly throughout the rest of the game. Plus it sticks to a central theme, which I really enjoy for my builds. And it does it all really well. Alright, thanks for hanging around. We'll see you in the next one.